Imagine walking into your own restaurant and no one recognizing you. Not just that, they ignore you, laugh at you, and whisper that you're too broke to afford a meal. That's exactly what happened to one man, a millionaire black business owner who went undercover to see how his employees really treated customers. But what he heard behind that counter, it broke his heart. He didn't yell. He didn't reveal himself. Not yet. He sat quietly, sipping bitter coffee, while the people he trusted most showed their true colors. But the next morning, when he walked back through those same doors, dressed in a sharp navy suit and carrying the truth with him, every single person in that diner learned exactly who they had disrespected. And when he finally spoke, his words didn't just change a restaurant, they changed lives. Stay until the end, because what he said that day might just change the way you see respect forever. Welcome to Brainfuel, where real stories ignite real change. Here, every video feeds your mind, warms your heart, and reminds you that kindness still matters. If you believe one voice can make a difference, hit subscribe, and let's take another step toward greatness. It was supposed to be a quiet morning, just coffee, toast, and peace. But when the man sitting alone at the corner booth lifted his head and caught a whisper from behind the counter, his heart sank. He had built this diner from the ground up, and what he was about to hear would break him more than any business failure ever could. His name was Malcolm Rivers, a self-made black entrepreneur who had gone from washing dishes in a diner to owning a dozen of them across the Midwest. He was the kind of man who believed that success meant lifting others with you. His diners weren't just places to eat. They were supposed to be places where everyone felt welcome, where kindness was served with every cup of coffee. At least, that's what he believed. But lately, something had changed. It started with small things. A loyal customer had sent him a letter, handwritten, saying she'd stop visiting one of his locations because she didn't feel welcome anymore. Another email came from a young man who claimed the staff treated him like a beggar because he looked poor. Then a third message arrived from a mother who said her family was ignored while others were served first. Malcolm's heart dropped each time he read one. These weren't random complaints. They were warnings. And this morning, he decided to see it for himself. No assistant, no driver, no fancy car. Just him, dressed in a plain gray hoodie, faded jeans, and old baseball cap pulled low. He parked his modest black sedan down the block, tucked his hands into his pockets, and walked toward the familiar red and white sign that read, Riverside Breakfast House. He had built that sign with pride. It was his first diner, the one where he used to mop the floors at 2 a.m., the one that launched his entire career. But now, as he stood in front of it, he noticed something different. The once cheerful place looked tired. The windows were smudged, the open sign flickered weakly, and the warmth that once greeted every guest was gone. When Malcolm stepped inside, a small bell jingled over the door. The smell of bacon, eggs, and burnt toast filled the air, the kind of smell that usually felt like home. But not today. Today, the air felt cold. He looked around. The counter was lined with regulars, a few chatting quietly over coffee. A waitress in a wrinkled apron stood behind the register, chewing gum and scrolling on her phone. She didn't look up when he entered. He cleared his throat politely and said, "Good morning." Without looking at him, she muttered, "Sit anywhere you like." No smile, no warmth, no welcome. Malcolm nodded and chose a booth near the window, the same booth he used to eat at after long shifts years ago. Back then, the staff would greet every customer with a cheerful, "How's your morning going?" Now, all he heard was a clatter of dishes and the low hum of distant chatter. A few minutes later, a young white waiter came over, holding a small notepad. His posture was impatient, his tone sharp. "What'll it be?" Malcolm smiled kindly. "Just toast and black coffee, please." The waiter scribbled something, didn't even look up, and walked away. "No, thank you." "No," coming right up. Just silence. Malcolm watched quietly as the same waiter turned around moments later and greeted another customer, a white man in a neat suit with a bright, friendly tone. "Good morning, Mr. Jacobs." The usual today. Malcolm's smile faded. He leaned back in his seat and observed. The cook in the kitchen was joking with another employee. The manager, a man with slick back hair and a gold chain, stood near the counter laughing with the same waiter. They weren't paying attention to the customers. Not really. Malcolm sighed softly. This wasn't the diner he built. This was something else. Something he didn't recognize. He picked up the menu, pretending to read it, but his ears caught the sound of soft laughter near the counter. Then, just loud enough to hear, a voice whispered, careless, cruel, and quiet. "Don't bother with him," someone said. "He's probably just another broke guy looking for free refills." Malcolm froze. The words hit him like a slap. His hand tightened around the edge of the table. He turned his head slightly, just enough to see two employees, the same waiter and another young woman, smirking behind the counter. The waiter shrugged, whispering again, "You can always tell. They come in here, order the cheapest thing on the menu, and sit for hours." They laughed softly, as if it were some kind of joke. Malcolm felt his chest tighten. For a long moment, he just sat there, staring at his reflection in the window, his hoodie, his tired face, the disguise that suddenly didn't feel like a disguise at all. He had worked his entire life so that people like him wouldn't be judged like that. He built this diner on principles of quality and respect. Yet here he was being disrespected in his own place by his own staff. But instead of anger, what he felt was disappointment. Deep, quiet disappointment. He wanted to stand up and reveal who he was. He wanted to shout, "I own this place." But he didn't. Not yet. Because real truth doesn't come when people are scared of getting caught. It comes when they think no one's watching. And right now, they thought he was no one. So Malcolm stayed silent. He took a sip of the coffee. The waiter dropped on his table without a word. It was lukewarm and bitter, but he drank it anyway. Then he waited for his toast, which took nearly 15 minutes. While he waited, he observed everything. How the staff ignored customers who didn't fit their image of important. How they laughed among themselves instead of helping. How the manager leaned on the counter scrolling his phone while tables waited to be cleaned. Malcolm's mind replayed every complaint he'd ever read, and now it all made sense. The toast finally arrived, cold and dry. No butter, no jam, no care. Just two plain slices slapped onto a chipped plate. Malcolm looked down at it, then up at the staff again. He forced himself to smile, because this moment, this quiet, painful moment, was exactly why he came. He didn't just come for answers. He came for the truth. And now he had it. As he took his last sip of coffee, the same waiter passed by again, calling out cheerfully to another table, "Enjoy your meal, sir." Malcolm glanced at the waiter, who still didn't look his way. Then, with a slow, calm breath, Malcolm whispered under his breath, words only he could hear, "You have no idea who you're serving." And with that, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a few bills, and placed them gently beside his untouched toast. The day wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. Tomorrow, they'd find out exactly who that broke guy really was. Malcolm sat in his car for nearly 20 minutes after leaving the diner. The taste of burnt coffee still lingered on his tongue, but what really stayed with him was the bitterness of that whisper, "He's probably just another broke guy." He looked through the diner's front window from across the street, his restaurant, his name on the sign. But inside, the people who were supposed to represent him were laughing, chatting, and treating customers like nuisances. The warmth that once filled that place was gone, replaced by something cold, something toxic. Malcolm's fingers drummed against the steering wheel. He wasn't the kind of man who exploded in anger. He'd been raised to believe that true leadership was calm under pressure. Still, deep inside, something was burning, not out of pride, but out of disappointment. "I gave them everything," he muttered softly. "And this is how they treat people?" He sat there thinking about how far he'd come. There was a time when he was the one being ignored, the dishwasher no one noticed, the kid everyone doubted. He remembered saving every dollar just to buy old equipment, fixing it himself, dreaming of a place where no one felt invisible. That dream was supposed to be Riverside Breakfast House. Now, it was just another restaurant, and he refused to let that stand. The next morning, Malcolm woke up before sunrise. He had barely slept, but his mind was clear. He needed to see more, to understand how deep this problem went. Maybe the whisper was just one person's ignorance, or maybe the entire place had forgotten what it stood for. He dressed in the same hoodie and jeans, grabbed his car keys, and drove back to the diner. This time, he arrived during the morning rush, when the real test began. Inside, the diner was buzzing with customers. The smell of pancakes and fresh coffee filled the air, and the chatter of breakfast conversations blended with the sound of plates clinking. But under that familiar hum, Malcolm could sense tension, impatience, disorganization, and something else, a lack of care. He sat down quietly at a corner booth again. The same waiter spotted him, rolled his eyes, and walked the other way. This time, Malcolm didn't say anything. He wanted to see how far it would go. He waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Still, no one came to take his order. Across the room, an elderly black couple had just walked in and sat near the window. They smiled politely at the hostess, who didn't even greet them. She simply dropped menus on their table and walked off. But when a well-dressed man entered a few seconds later, she suddenly brightened up. "Good morning. How are you today, Mr. Jacobs?" she said sweetly, guiding him to his favorite seat and bringing water without him asking. Malcolm felt his stomach twist. The difference was painfully clear. Finally, a young woman in a messy ponytail, maybe 19 or 20, approached his table, holding a coffee pot. Her name tag read Lena. "Sorry for the wait, sir," she said softly, her voice kind and genuine. "Can I get you something to start?" Malcolm nodded. "Just some toast and black coffee, please." She smiled faintly, coming right up. Her tone was different, polite, respectful, human. It reminded him of how his employees used to sound years ago when he first opened the diner. He could tell immediately she wasn't part of the problem. A few minutes later, she returned with the coffee, pouring it carefully. As she set it down, she glanced over her shoulder toward the counter, then leaned slightly closer to him. "Sir," she whispered quietly, "I just want to say, I'm sorry about how they treated you yesterday." Malcolm blinked in surprise. "You remember me?" She nodded. "Yeah, I saw what happened. It wasn't right." He studied her expression. She wasn't just being nice. She looked genuinely upset. "You've seen this before, haven't you?" he asked. Lena hesitated, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "Every day. They treat people differently depending on how they look. If someone's wearing a suit or looks rich, they get smiles and refills. But if they look poor or different, they act like they don't exist." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "And the manager? He knows about this." She nodded again, her eyes sad. "I told him once. He said I should mind my place if I want to keep my job." Malcolm looked down at his hands, then back at her. He could feel the frustration building inside him, not because of her story, but because he realized this wasn't just bad service. It was a culture, a toxic one that had taken root while he wasn't watching. He smiled gently at her. "Thank you for telling me the truth, Lena. What's your position here?" "I'm just a server. I started last month." She said, "It's not perfect, but I need the paycheck. My mom's sick, and I'm trying to help with bills." Malcolm nodded slowly, respect filling his voice. "I understand. You did the right thing, and you've done more than you know." Lena looked confused but grateful. "Thank you, sir." As she walked away, Malcolm noticed a manager glaring at her from across the room, clearly suspicious of their conversation. The man whispered something to the waiter, the same one who had mocked Malcolm yesterday, and both of them laughed. That was the moment Malcolm knew what had to be done. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small notepad, and jotted down details, names, actions, things he'd seen. Every moment of disrespect was being recorded. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about protecting the name he'd built with his bare hands. When he finished his coffee, Malcolm placed a bill on the table, along with a crisp $100 bill folded neatly under his plate. The waiter, spotting the cash, hurried over instantly. His tone changed completely. "Oh, thank you, sir. Would you like change?" Malcolm looked up calmly. "No, thank you. You keep it." The waiter grinned awkwardly. "Oh, thanks. That's really generous." Malcolm nodded once, stood up, and said quietly, "It's not generosity. It's a lesson." The waiter frowned, confused, as Malcolm walked out the door. That night, when the diner closed, every employee received a text from corporate headquarters, short, direct, and unexpected. Mandatory staff meeting, 8 a.m. sharp. Attendance required. The message ended with a name that made every employee sit up straight. Malcolm Rivers, founder and CEO. Panic rippled through the staff group chat. The waiter typed, "Wait, the Malcolm Rivers? He's coming here." The manager replied, "Don't worry, folks. Probably just some corporate pep talk." But deep down, everyone knew something was coming. Something serious. And as Malcolm sat at his desk that night, reviewing every note he'd taken, he whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, they'll understand what this diner was meant to stand for." He turned off the light, closed his notebook, and leaned back in his chair. The plan was set. Tomorrow morning, Riverside Breakfast House would never be the same again. The next morning, the sun had barely climbed above the horizon when the staff of Riverside Breakfast House began trickling in. There was tension in the air, thick, silent, almost electric. Everyone had received the same message the night before. Mandatory staff meeting, 8 a.m. sharp. Attendance required. Malcolm Rivers, founder and CEO. For most of them, that name carried weight. The mysterious owner whose story had inspired their training videos. The man who once worked in diners and built an empire from scratch. But no one had ever seen him in person. To them, he was just a name on a paycheck, a signature on the bottom of their schedules. The manager, Mr. Clifford, was pacing near the counter, slicking back his hair nervously. He tried to sound confident. "Relax, people," he said. "It's probably just some corporate nonsense. He won't be here long. Just smile and act professional." But his tone betrayed the anxiety in his eyes. Lena stood quietly near the register, her apron neatly tied, her heart pounding. She didn't sleep much that night. Something about the man from yesterday, the quiet customer in the hoodie, kept echoing in her mind. The way he listened, the calm authority in his voice, the strange sense that he wasn't just another customer. Now she was starting to wonder if that man might have been more than he appeared. The clock hit 8:03. The chatter faded. All eyes turned toward the door as it opened slowly. A pair of polished black shoes stepped in first, followed by a tall man in a perfectly tailored navy suit. His posture was calm but commanding. And then, when he lifted his head, the entire room froze. It was him, the broke guy from 2 days ago. The same man they had ignored, insulted, and whispered about. Only now, there was no hoodie, no disguise, just quiet power and dignity. Malcolm Rivers stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He took a slow breath, scanned the faces in front of him, and said in a steady, deep voice, "Good morning." No one responded. Even the air seemed to stop moving. He walked toward the center of the room, his footsteps echoing softly on the tile. "My name is Malcolm Rivers. I'm the founder and owner of Riverside Breakfast House, this diner, and 11 others just like it." The silence grew heavier. The waiter who had mocked him looked pale. The manager's mouth fell open. He tried to speak, but Malcolm raised a hand gently, stopping him cold. 2 days ago, Malcolm continued, I came into this diner dressed like any ordinary man. I wanted to see how my customers were treated when no one knew who they were. I ordered toast and coffee, and what I got was a lesson. He turned slightly, looking at the counter, at the spot where that cruel whisper had been born. I heard words behind this counter that no one in this company should ever say. I saw people ignored, judged, and dismissed, not for what they did, but for how they looked. The manager finally stepped forward, stammering, "Mr. Rivers, if I had known." Malcolm's calm eyes cut to him. "That's the problem, Mr. Clifford. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect." The man's mouth closed instantly. Malcolm's voice grew firm, not loud, but powerful enough that everyone listened. "When I started this diner 20 years ago, it wasn't about the food. It was about people. I built this place on one promise, that no one would ever feel invisible here. I wanted a place where kindness was served as generously as coffee, But somewhere along the way, that promise was broken. He took a deep breath and walked toward one of the booths, resting his hand on the backrest, the same one he'd sat in wearing his hoodie. I sat right here while your staff laughed behind the counter. I heard them call me broke. I saw others ignored while some were treated like royalty. Tell me, he turned, his eyes meeting each of theirs, is that what this place stands for now? No one answered. The waiter looked down. The hostess fiddled nervously with her notepad. The cook stared at the floor. Then Malcolm turned his gaze toward Lena. She looked up, startled, unsure what to do. "Lena," he said softly, "would you come here, please?" She hesitated, then stepped forward. "Yes, sir." "You were the only one," Malcolm said, his voice warm now, "who treated me like a person. You spoke up, even when it could have cost you your job. That kind of courage, that kind of heart, is exactly what this diner was built on." Lena's eyes filled with tears. I couldn't stay quiet, sir. It wasn't right." Malcolm smiled gently. "And that's why, starting today, you're the new assistant manager of this diner." The room gasped. The manager blinked in shock. "Sir, you can't." Malcolm turned to him. "I can, and I just did." He paused, then added calmly, "You, Mr. Clifford, are relieved of your duties, effective immediately." The man's face turned red. "You're firing me? After all I've done for this place?" Malcolm's tone stayed calm, but there was steel in it. "You didn't take care of this place. You poisoned it. You made good people afraid to speak, and bad behavior seem normal. That ends today." The man's shoulders slumped. He didn't argue. He just grabbed his jacket and left quietly. The door closed behind him with a soft chime. Malcolm turned back to the staff. "To everyone else, consider this a new beginning. From today forward, we go back to what Riverside was meant to be. A place where every customer matters. A place where we greet people with respect, no matter what they wear, where they come from, or what they can afford. Because if we can't do that, we don't deserve to serve them." A long silence followed. Then Lena spoke softly. "We'll do better, sir. I promise." Malcolm smiled. "I believe you will." He looked around at the group, at their faces, some ashamed, some hopeful, and said, "I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to remind you. This diner isn't just a building. It's a story. It's my story and yours too. Every smile, every plate, every small act of kindness, it matters." He walked over the front wall, where a dusty old frame hung crookedly, a photo of him from years ago, wearing an apron, standing in front of First Riverside Diner. He straightened it and turned to them one last time. "Put the heart back into this place," he said, "because without heart, it's just another restaurant." Then, before leaving, he handed Lena a small plaque from his briefcase. It read, "Respect is the main ingredient. Hang this up where everyone can see it," he told her. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I will, sir." Malcolm smiled, took one last look around the diner, and walked out into the morning sun. As he stood on the sidewalk, he watched through the window, customers being greeted with smiles, coffee being refilled, and Lena helping an elderly woman find her seat. For the first time in a long while, Malcolm felt something lift off his shoulders. The diner had a second chance, and so did the people inside it. He took a deep breath, whispered to himself, "Sometimes you have to go undercover to remind people what humanity looks like," and walked away, leaving behind not just a diner, but a legacy reborn.